On Halloween night, a woman stayed home with her young daughter for just a few minutes while her husband made a quick trip to the store. But when he returned, he was met with a horrifying sight, something so gruesome that even seasoned police officers later required psychological counseling. The truth behind this dreadful case shocked everyone involved. Doreen Erbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California, growing up in a large family of 5 children. She was kind, optimistic, and always eager to help others. From her school years, she knew she wanted a career that involved caring for people, so after college, she moved to San Francisco and became a physiotherapist. Doreen also dreamed of having a loving big family of her own, and at 24, she met a man named Michael Venice. Michael worked at a manufacturing plant near Doreen's clinic, and the two quickly fell in love. A few months later, they married, and in 1976, they welcomed their son, Paul. At first, their marriage was happy, but after Paul's birth, their relationship started to deteriorate. Within a year, they divorced, though they remained civil. Paul stayed with Doreen, and Michael was granted regular visitation rights. Despite the separation, they managed to maintain a relatively normal relationship. A year later, Doreen met Charles, and they quickly fell in love. They married, moved to San Jose, and settled into a quiet residential neighborhood. In 1979, their daughter Diana was born. Charles was thrilled to have a family, raising Paul as his own and cherishing their new baby girl. But tragedy struck in February 1980. 4-year-old Paul managed to climb over the fence surrounding the family's swimming pool and fell into the water. Doreen was at home at the time, but by the time she noticed, it was too late. She pulled him out and immediately called an ambulance. Paul was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support. For 10 agonizing days, doctors fought to save him, but ultimately, there was no hope. The decision was made to take him off life support. Doreen was devastated. Though the police investigation ruled the incident an accident and cleared her of any wrongdoing, she couldn't stop blaming herself. The grief was unbearable, but she found solace in her daughter Diana, who gave her a reason to keep going. 4 years after this heartbreaking loss, something good finally happened. Doreen and Charles had been trying to have another child for a long time, but their hopes had been crushed by 2 failed pregnancies. Finally, Doreen became pregnant again, and this time, everything was going smoothly. Their baby boy was due in early November, and the entire family eagerly awaited his arrival. Then came Halloween night. The neighborhood was alive with festive decorations, trick-or-treaters, and the joy of children collecting candy. Diana, now 4 years old, was excited to go door to door. Despite being 9 months pregnant, Doreen didn't want to disappoint her daughter, so she accompanied her while Charles stayed home to hand out candy. Mother and daughter returned home shortly before 9 p.m. Charles informed Doreen that they were almost out of candy and decided to make a quick trip to the store. He didn't want to turn away neighborhood kids, so he left the house at 8:50 p.m., expecting to be back in no time. But when he returned just 15 minutes later, he found the front door slightly ajar. His gut told him something was wrong. Inside, he walked into a nightmare. Doreen lay in the hallway, surrounded by a pool of blood. She wasn't moving. Stunned and terrified, Charles called 911, but then he saw something even more horrific. In the living room, the body of their unborn child lay lifeless on the floor. Beside the baby, he saw a severed human hand. It didn't take him long to realize it was Doreen's. Charles, now in a complete state of shock, searched desperately for Diana, fearing the worst. Blood was everywhere, on the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. In his frantic rush, he slipped and fell, but then he heard a sound. He found his daughter hiding behind the sofa. She was alive. When paramedics arrived, they detected a weak pulse in Doreen and rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, she passed away in the ambulance. Her baby also hadn't survived. In addition to being removed from the womb, the unborn child had been brutally attacked. Medical examiners later confirmed that Doreen had suffered multiple wounds from a long, sharp object, something like a sword or machete. The crime scene was so horrifying that even experienced police officers struggled to process what they had seen. Some later required psychological counseling. The investigation began immediately, but there were no clear leads. Outside, bloody footprints led to the middle of the street, suggesting the killer had entered a car and driven away. On the front lawn, investigators found something chilling, a blood-soaked wolf mask. Diana, though in shock, was the only witness. When police gently questioned her, she recounted what happened. Shortly after her father left for the store, there was a knock at the door. When Doreen answered, she saw a man in a wolf mask holding a long blade. He simply said, "I'm going to kill you now." Doreen screamed for Diana to run. The little girl hid behind the sofa, too terrified to move. The next thing she remembered was her father finding her. Police initially suspected Charles, but inconsistencies in this theory quickly ruled him out. Surveillance footage confirmed he was at the store, and the bloody footprints didn't match his shoes. The killer had likely fled in a car, yet Charles's vehicle had no blood traces. Charles then told police about someone who might have had a motive: Doreen's ex-husband, Michael. Michael had never forgiven Doreen for Paul's death. He had even sued her, claiming she was responsible, though he lost the case. After the divorce, Michael had struggled with depression and isolation. He had always been socially withdrawn due to hearing problems that required a bulky hearing aid, which had made him a target for bullying as a child. Investigators visited Michael's home and found a pickup truck with what appeared to be blood on the steering wheel. When Michael answered the door, he seemed eerily calm, even after being told his ex-wife had been murdered. But officers noticed something else. He had a deep, fresh cut on his right hand. Inside the house, police found damning evidence: an empty box for an 18-inch machete, 2 handmade coffins, and body bags. Blood-stained clothes were discovered in the washing machine. Despite all this, the judge initially deemed the evidence circumstantial, and Michael walked free. However, forensic tests soon confirmed that some of the blood at the crime scene matched Michael's. This time, the judge issued an arrest warrant, and he was charged with the murders of Doreen and her unborn child. During the trial, Michael initially pleaded guilty but later changed his plea, claiming insanity. A psychologist confirmed he had serious mental health issues. Michael claimed he snapped when he saw children trick-or-treating, reminded of the son he had lost. He went to Doreen's house, and when she answered the door, he told her, "You killed my son," before attacking her. He insisted he had no idea she was pregnant, a claim no one believed. After a year-long trial, Michael was found guilty and sentenced to death. However, California later imposed a moratorium on capital punishment, leaving him behind bars indefinitely. Years later, Diana revealed that the trauma of that night haunted her every day. Eventually, she chose to forgive Michael, knowing that if she didn't, she might never be able to heal.